and a very warm welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. I'm Laura Cellier. Straight to our top story this hour. And Hezbollah fired around 100 rockets into northern Israel today. The IDF responding with airstrikes on Hezbollah positions inside Lebanon. Schools in Beirut were closed today. Well, as the fighting continues, the outgoing Biden administration is seeking to secure a ceasefire. The US Special Envoy to the region, Amos Hochstein, was due to visit on Tuesday, but has just announced that visit has been postponed. Well, let's go straight to the north of Israel because we do have some breaking news. Our correspondent Zach Andrews is standing by. And Zach, there has been a direct hit. Several people wounded, I understand, up in the north of Israel tonight.
Laura, that's right. In Shafar, there are 6 casualties. This is initial reports from within the last 45 minutes. The National Ambulance Service here also saying that one person, a woman, is trapped in the building from the rocket fire and that they're working to extricate her from the building, which does appear to be on fire from some of the initial images that we see on scene. But it's not entirely clear whether the woman is trapped in the same building that's on fire. We are going to move on our way now to that location to try and understand more. But again, the initial reports here, Laura, 6 casualties, 6 injured from this latest round of rocket fire here into northern Israel, coming off of a day where already 2 have been injured by earlier rocket fire. A woman in her 50s earlier today and a man in his 30s also wounded by shrapnel and blast impact. I'm told that those injuries are not life-threatening, but this is from earlier rocket fire. Again, in the last 45 minutes, another attack and 6 injuries there. We don't have a full extent of the casualties or damage. We're working to learn more.
Zach, thank you very much indeed. Zach Andrews there up in the north of Israel, where at least 6 people have been wounded following a direct hit by Hezbollah rockets. Well, joining me in the studio this hour, Jonathan El-Khouri is a Lebanese-Israeli public diplomacy advisor. Great to have you with us, Jonathan. And Lieutenant Colonel Doron Avital is a former commander in the Special Forces in the IDF. Good to have you with us as well, Doron. So, Jonathan, a reminder, as if we needed one, just how dangerous those Hezbollah attacks are and that they don't discriminate between Israel's Jewish and Muslim citizens.
Yeah, exactly. We're seeing that Hezbollah, at the end of the day, are firing rockets towards every territory inside of northern of Israel, and they're trying to direct and hit anyone in their way. We've seen it, in the last few weeks that they have been at extended layers of firing rockets and barrages throughout the north. It ended up also last week hitting a place in Nahariya where two citizens were killed. One Israeli Christian and the other one is Israeli Jewish. We see that Hezbollah doesn't distinguish between anyone. At the end of the day, they want to harm as much as Israelis as possible. And it comes out also at the time that there has been talks about negotiations between the sides, between Israel and Lebanon. We see that also Israel is widening its targets over Hezbollah places, widening also the circle, you can say, inside of Beirut, and not just in the Dahia area that is a Hezbollah 100%, but also other places that belongs to Hezbollah outside of those territories inside of Lebanon.
All right, Jonathan. Doron, we are seeing an uptick, aren't we? I think it's fair to say in the last few days or so in those attacks from Lebanon. And at the same time, the US envoy, Amos Hochstein, has decided to call off his visit. What do you read into that?
No, I think there is some progress. I mean, of course, you have to balance your act in terms as a mediator, but there's an attempt, of course, to go to some agreement. I think even the Israeli, our maneuvering in the southern border of Lebanon is such that aims into some agreement. It's not like we decided to conquer the whole buffer until the Litani, because this would be a different state of affairs. So the fact that we are only on those ridge of mountains commanding our territory in Israel and trying to undermine enough infrastructure that we can, and of course
destroying the tunnels, destroying the missiles, destroying the launch capabilities.
Yeah, and then hit, as was mentioned, targets in Baalbek, in Beirut, in other places. But everybody waits the possibility of an agreement. Of course, for us it's not simple because the base of the agreement is 1701, but the way for us to enforce it and how it will be enforced, this is where the tricky side is.
Well, quite. I mean, the latest reports suggest that Hezbollah rejected the latest offer.
It's not. They don't. Their base point or point of reference is 1701. In fact, they don't want to add a letter to 1701.
But it's about who enforces it.
Exactly, and we are very bothered about the enforcement. Of course, it's a little bit strange that we'll sign an agreement. Anyway, if the agreement is violated, we can react. So I'm not sure, but there's some appendix that have to be added up, and there would be agreed that we will feel more comfortable that the supervision of any violation is possible. This is what the tricky side is. How can we supervise that the violation
That's the sticking
occurred,
point,
and then we can counterattack?
Because, Jonathan, that's what went wrong before, wasn't it? There was a solution agreed, but nobody enforced it, and Hezbollah was allowed to reapproach the border and rearm significantly. I mean, what's to stop that happening again?
Exactly. This is the question, and this is why I believe that Israel should continue and pressure on these two lines that in Lebanon are refusing to accept. Moreover, it's not just Lebanon, it's Nabih Berri, the head of the parliament, that is 100% affiliated with Hezbollah and is agreed on by Hezbollah, that is spoken on behalf of the organization's name. And these two lines that are being refused by Lebanon is one, the agreement that Israel would be able to respond if Hezbollah would violate any of, they will try to regain back their capabilities. And the other one is to widen, at the end of the day, the international force that will be supervising towards Lebanon. It will be, today we know that the US and France are part of this supervision that Lebanon are agreeing on. Israel wants to add maybe Germany or the UK also to be part of this forces. That's what Hezbollah is objecting, and also the second one is Israel's capabilities to respond if Hezbollah at the end of the day, not accept it. I do believe that Israel can't take down these two issues because it shows that the Lebanese negotiations are not happening in good faith. Because if they think that they will be capable of actually stopping Hezbollah, they won't have any problem, because Israel wouldn't have to respond, and then no Lebanese sovereignty will be hit because of that. But because Lebanon are refusing, or basically Hezbollah are refusing, Israel should precisely stick on to these 2 points.
Doron, I mean, is it realistic to expect that anything can happen when we've got this state of flux in Washington? We're waiting for President Trump to take office in January. I mean, can anything advance at this point?
Yeah, Trump would have liked to start with a clean slate and to have an agreement between us and the Lebanese. It's hard to call it the Lebanese because it's not clear that there's a real infrastructure that can strengthen things. But perhaps, I don't know, there's some, because otherwise we'll have to decide what's the next step in terms of our Israeli troops in the southern border of Lebanon, whether we continue forward, whether we back off. So it's tricky. There was much more optimism in the morning, and right now with Hochstein delaying his trip.
But is there any point for Israel to keep talking to the Biden administration when they're halfway out the door?
I think there are certain subjects that the Trump administration and the Biden administration might not see eye to eye. But in terms of a ceasefire in Lebanon, I would think they see it eye to eye. I think if Trump comes, he would put his full weight for a ceasefire with the Lebanese. Then he would follow suit to see what he does with the Iranians. We saw Elon Musk talking with the Iranian, I think, ambassador or whatever in the UN. So it will be interesting to see Trump playing the Iranian card. But in terms of the ceasefire, I think, in terms of this agreement, I think we might find that the two administrations see eye to eye.
You agree with that, Jonathan?
I do agree. At the end of the day, Trump said, even before he was elected, that he wants to stop the war no matter what. He hates wars, and more than that, he hates long wars, and he thinks that this war has been extended too much. I've heard him speak myself when I was at the IAC conference last September, when he spoke to the Jewish community, saying that he will support Israel no matter what, but on the other hand, he doesn't want that war to continue endlessly. And on that, he has also a member of his family that is Lebanese that he also gave, you can say, promises to.
Yes.
Exactly. And that was his father that is part of Trump's campaign, trying to also bring voters from the Lebanese diaspora that are living in Michigan particularly, but in other places in the U.S. And he said that he's going to be the one appointed to the Lebanese side that during Trump's administration that could be leading towards, favorable anti-Hezbollah.
So we could see some big changes all around come January.
Yeah, and another player, of course, is the Lebanese army. Whether we can rebuild the Lebanese army, there will be a force that can supervise or enforce the agreement.
All right, thank you both. Well, Jordan was drawn into the conflict once again when a malfunctioning Israeli interception rocket fell on the Red Sea city of Aqaba. Thankfully, there were no casualties. The missile was fired in order to intercept a drone that had been fired at Eilat from Iraq. More in this report.
Overnight, the IDF has shot down a drone from Iraq targeting Eilat. The Iranian-backed Islamic resistance in Iraq has claimed the attack. Videos on social media showed the interception bolting into the sky before falling back down and landing near a hotel strip in the Jordan coastal city of Aqaba, just over the border with Israel. The malfunctioning interceptor reportedly landed next to a luxury development, causing 2 explosions. The Jordanian military confirmed that a, quote, flying object hit Aqaba, the kingdom's state-run Petra news agency reported. According to the news agency, there were no serious injuries or damages. The IDF hasn't commented. Jordan has been walking a tightrope between maintaining diplomatic ties with Israel and containing the anti-Israel sentiment among its population, which consists of a large group of people who are descended from Palestinian refugees. Despite efforts to quell the unrest among the Jordanian people, protests have erupted regularly in support of the Palestinian people, with most recently a hunger strike of 60 Jordanian men and women who are demanding the entry of 500 aid trucks into northern Gaza and an end to the siege on the Strip. 18 days in, a number of them have been hospitalized due to a drop in their blood sugar. And so, with the failed Israeli interceptions striking Jordan, more fuel has been added to the already raging fire which burns within the Hashemite kingdom.
Well, Israel can expect more attacks from Iraqi territory. The Iranian-backed militia in Syria are reportedly moving their bases to Iraq in order to avoid Israeli airstrikes. To talk more about that, we're joined by Entifad Kanbar, president and founder of the Kurdish Protection Action Committee and the former spokesman for the Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq. Thank you for being with us, Entifad. Always good to see you. So, I mean, Iraq is supposed to be a staunch US ally. Why is it safer for Iranian proxies to operate there than it is in war-torn Syria?
Well, good to see you, Laura, as always. With the exception of Kurdistan, Iraq, Iraqi militias, proxies of Iran, almost has the full freedom to function within the Iraqi territory. Unfortunately, the Iraqi government is also implicated in funding these militias, not secretly, even overtly, within the budget of the 2024, 23, 22 of the Iraqi state. And so we've been pushing Prime Minister Soudani to take strict actions and arrest those people. Over hundreds of these attacks, Laura, happened from Iraq, and no one has been arrested or convicted or shown perpetrating. The Iraqi government only is paying lip talk without any action, talking to the United States as a friend while supporting these militias. I don't think this is going to continue, especially with the Trump administration coming, and Trump is going to take strong actions to cripple Iran and force this peace in the Middle East based on strength.
Well, I was going to ask you then, I mean, do you think we will see some change come January when President Trump takes office? Will he be able to put the pressure on Baghdad to deal with the Iranian militia? Perhaps he'll decide just to cut his losses and pull American troops out.
It's very unfortunate, Laura. Baghdad became an extension of Tehran. Baghdad is a satellite of Tehran. If Tehran is weakened, if Iran is weakened, so as the militias in Iraq. But that also requires massive amount of sanctions, which I heard from many sources in Washington, on Iraq itself, on the Iraqi Ministry of Oil, on many Iraqi financial institutes, to stop the bleeding of Iraqi dollars to fund Hezbollah and the militias and to go to Iran. So, and then plus, Laura, we have to remember, Iraq is now a passage through the land bridge from the eastern border of Iraq to the western border of Iraq, and Al-Qa'im, then Al-Tanf in Syria, for fighters, for weapons, for ammunition towards Syria and Lebanon, Hezbollah, to threaten the region and threaten Israel. So Iraq has now become a key issue in establishing a sustainable peace, as President Trump wants. See, the call for ceasefire, in my opinion, is a military call. which means basically stop the fire now, we'll resume fighting again. I think what Trump's looking for, not ceasefire, I think what Trump's looking for, sustainable peace. And that's why the Muslim and the Middle Eastern communities voted for him, not because he was going to impose ceasefire, he was going to reach sustainable peace. And this sustainable peace will never be reached with Iran still strong.
All right. Well, I want to ask you about something that's happening inside Iraq. The government's just ordered a nationwide curfew, and that includes the Kurdistan region, because they're carrying out the first census in Iraq in nearly 40 years. Just your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, these censuses are important, but at the same time, a lot of people are speculating this could be used to make demographic changes. There is very little trust in the government of Iraq by the people of Iraq, with the exception of Kurdistan. Again, I mean, the Kurdish government is a totally different world, but they have to abide by the federal restrictions of the curfew. But again, we have there are transitional areas between the Kurds and Arabs, which a lot of them claimed by Kurdistan but has not been given to Kurdistan. And also there's an issue of Shia versus Sunnis. So we have to wait and see, but there's a huge amount of fear that this census will be used with Iranian pressure to change the demographics of Iraq.
Will be interesting to see the results. Entifad, great to talk to you as always. Thank you very much. Entifad Kambar there. And Doron Avital and Jonathan El Khoury with me in the studio. Doron, I mean, these drones, they're becoming a real problem for Israel, aren't they? Not just from the north, but as we've just seen from Iraq as well.
This is a new dimension of the landscape of war for people, veterans of previous wars. When I think about my nephew or the kids of my friends fighting in those battlefields, this is a different dimension. There's an aerial dimension. You see it in Ukraine. They can fly for hours. They can come from different directions. So for sure, in one thing we are very good is this aerial defense mechanism that we succeeded for the year to secure, from Iron Dome to those things that intercept, the arrow that intercept ballistic missiles. But yeah, this is a new landscape of war.
Jonathan, and a reminder once again just how many fronts Israel is fighting on.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Israel is fighting, people say 7 fronts. I say 8 fronts because we have also the public diplomacy front that we're still battling on Israel's right to defend itself and its citizens. We have, Hezbollah in the north in Lebanon that is being a proxy by Iran. We have also Hamas in Gaza that is also funded and supported by Iran. We have also fractions inside of the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. We have the resistance in Syria that is being also supported by Hezbollah and by the Iranian Islamic Republic of Iran. You have also in Iraq that they have also Islamic resistance in Iraq that is affiliated and part and funded by the Islamic Republic of Iran. At the end of the day, Iran is funding everyone in the territory that is currently threatening us and harming us daily day. And this is something that I believe if we want to solve all these 7 plus 1 international front, we should hold Iran accountable for doing that.
You're right, and the 8th front is very important as well. All right, thank you both. Well, hundreds of families of the American victims of October 7th have filed a lawsuit against Iran for its part in the attacks. Lawyers have obtained original documents that show a secret meeting of a small group of Hamas leaders in December 2022, nearly a full year before the attack took place. More in this report.
Families of October 7 victims have filed a lawsuit against Iran and its proxies in a US federal court. The backbone for this claim? Unveiling secret Hamas papers which allegedly proves Tehran's involvement in the attack. These documents have been uncovered by lawyer Gary Olsen and are believed to show the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps funneling millions of dollars to Hamas. Furthermore, the complaint also includes a document from a 2022 meeting of senior Hamas members Yahya Sinwar, Khalil al-Haya and others plotting out a defense agreement between Hamas and other Iranian-backed groups, in case a war were to break out. The paper includes a decision to request $7 million monthly from Iran to Hamas to, quote, mobilize and prepare for confrontations for the big project, as it was called. Besides Iran and Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine are also being sued. Left out of the suit are US allies Qatar and Turkey, who've also been accused of funding Hamas. Yemen's Houthi rebels are also excluded from the suit. The plaintiffs consist of 256 families, of whose family members were killed or kidnapped on October 7. Other plaintiffs include families from southern Israel who suffered emotionally during or after the attack, or families of soldiers who were killed in combat. Among them is Yechiel Leiter, who is set to become Israel's ambassador to the US. His son Moshe Leiter was killed in Gaza fighting in November 2023. The victims and their families seek financial compensation for their suffering. In similar cases, Iran has never showed up to defend itself and therefore allowing the plaintiffs to win.
Well, with us now, Arash Azizi is a contributing writer at The Atlantic, a visiting fellow at Boston University, and, of course, the author of several books, including The Shadow Commander. Good to see you, Arash. Thank you for joining us. So how strong is this case, would you say, and has there been any response from Tehran?
I think it could be a pretty strong case. If we look at the experience in the past, the reality is the Islamic Republic is in support of a number of terror organizations around the world. And some of their victims have been able to get compensation in the American courts before. There are significant Iranian assets that exist in the US and that could be seized further. So there is a possibility that they could do this. The response from Tehran will be, of course, predictable. They'll declare it as stealing the Iranian people's money. They'll call the ones who are doing it bandits and whatever else they want. They've done that before. I have to say that there are suits that are actually much more far-fetched. For example, even on 9/11 attacks that are not really directly linked to Iran, there have been attempts to do so. But here we're talking about the fact that Hamas and Islamic Jihad are very openly, proudly funded by Iran, unfortunately.
What
very
is
unfortunate, but the reality is they got a good case.
Well, I was going to ask you, what is the relationship now between Iran and Hamas? Does Tehran still have a lot of sway over the group? Has it cut the group loose because it's seen that it's going so badly for them in Gaza? I mean, what is the relationship right now?
The Islamic Republic has for a very long time supported Hamas. Sometimes the relationship has not gone so well, so they sort of cut ties for a few years during the Syrian civil war, where Iran wasn't supportive of the government, whereas Hamas was supportive of the opposition. But right now, the relationship is pretty good. Now, how much sway they have is another question, because Hamas itself is a complex organization. It has a military wing in Gaza. It has political leadership wings in other places. In Qatar, as you know, that base is currently being under question. Turkey is another important base for them. Lebanon is an important base for them also because of the Israeli attacks there. That base sort of has its problems now. So how much sway Iran has is another question, and that depends on particulars. But Iran openly funds, arms, and supports this group. And when I say openly, it means that's what they say. They don't deny it. It's not like the IRGC says, no, actually, we don't send arms to Hamas or the leadership of Iran. They very openly say so, unfortunately. Now, they say they're independent, and they're right to a degree. I think when we say proxy, sometimes that's overplayed. Hamas makes its own decisions. Let's say it has its own history. It's a political party, a movement with roots in Palestinian society. It has its own history and has its own sort of ideology, which is actually quite distinct from the ideology of Islamic Republic. It has its own roots in sort of Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni Islamist ideologies. But there's no doubt that Iran is the only country in the world that funds and arms the group. There are other countries like Turkey and others who've given them some source of funding. Qatar, of course, did so in coordination with Israel before. But it's Iran that really sort of pushes them on to follow an armed agenda and arms them and pushes them in that direction.
Arash, thank you very much indeed. Great to talk to you. Arash Azizi there. Well, Dora Navital and Jonathan El-Houri with me in the studio. And Jonathan, this lawsuit, which could be seen as the least of Iran's problems at the moment, but it does come amid a power struggle in Hamas, or what's left of the group. Who will rule them now?
Yeah, this is the greater question that we haven't been, had an answer to for almost a month after Sinwar's death. And this is something that we're looking for. They're talking about maybe his brother that could be leading it, that he's considered to be much more radical than him. But I wanted to ask, maybe to say something. The Islamic Republic of Iran said that they might respond by saying that the West is stealing Iranians' money.
Yeah.
Well, I have a suggestion. There was a report saying that the Islamic Republic of Iran is paying about $700 million each year for Hezbollah. So they can take that money and direct it to there.
I'm sure the Iranian
That could be a really great solution.
Would be very happy.
Yeah.
Many of them will be even happier with a change of regime. But that's all for us to say. Dora Navital, I mean, it's interesting, this power struggle, isn't it?
Yeah, but in the end, the arena is in the battlefield and in diplomacy, I think less in the legal court. So I'm not sure whether they would succeed. But it's important to note also for us, you talked about so many fronts that we are fighting with, that when you have so many fronts, you have to really think about your coalition and being at sync with your coalition, and our coalition is clear. So let's see how the front line would evolve right now. We have to take into account that Hamas, of course, is very weak now. I mean, the military infrastructure is, I wouldn't say dismantled completely, but severely hit, and then Hamas would have to find its path. And then we have to really think what's the day after in Gaza, and in this context, what would, I think, the civil circles of Hamas, what role would they play if in the day after in Gaza? And
we will certainly talk about that after the break. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed to you both. Well, we're going to go to Gaza next because UNRWA said today that armed men seized 97 trucks full of aid after it entered Gaza earlier today, aid that's supposed to go to Gazan civilians. But the UN agency failed to identify who carried out that raid. Puzzling. We'll talk more about that next. Stay with us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
Welcome back, and it's one of Israel's most important allies, but the United Arab Emirates has been without an Israeli ambassador for several weeks now, but the government here has just approved the appointment of Yossi Shelley, currently the Director General of the Prime Minister's office. Shelley is a close ally of Prime Minister Netanyahu and looks set to replace His Excellency Amir Hayek, who was the first diplomat to represent Israel in the UAE. Well, for more on that, let's go to Dubai. We're joined by our correspondent Bastien Bory. Bastien, tell us a bit more about this appointment and how has it been received in the UAE?
Well, this appointment comes as no surprise, as ambassadors typically serve in their role for 3 to 4 years. Israel's former ambassador to Abu Dhabi, Amir Hayek, had been in place since 2021, and this time the aim is to sort of breathe new life into relations between Israel and the Gulf countries, particularly from an economic point of view. We know that the Abraham Accords have already helped attract several $1 billion of additional Western investments to the region since 2020. So the peace survived, the interest survived, the mutual interest survived. And countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE are still officially pushing for greater economic ties with a particular desire to tap Israeli technology, as you know. Although it's true that in terms of trade, at the moment, the situation is quite complicated with lots of investors from both countries here saying that this war and this turmoil has considerably slowed down their business.
And meanwhile, Bastien, another close ally to Prime Minister Netanyahu was reportedly in the UAE over the weekend. I'm talking about Ron Dermer. Do we know if he was really there, and do we know what was said at those meetings?
Well, he basically wanted to secure Emirati support for post-war plans. We know that Israel has reached out to the UAE to play a pretty important role in a post-war reconstruction of the Strip, and Ron Dermer, being regarded, as you said, as Benjamin Netanyahu's closest advisor, this could potentially be marking a shift. Dermer is asking for an Emirati presence in Gaza. This should be the case at the economic level. We know that in both Saudi Arabia and the UAE, big companies are willing to launch projects for housing, tourism, industry, and so on within the Strip. And this should also be the case in terms of humanitarian aid. What's on the table are those so-called humanitarian bubbles for Gaza's future, meaning the establishment of humanitarian zones within Gaza, again, managed by Palestinian entities that are not related to Hamas. And the UAE is expected to play an important role, a financial role, for the security of these zones, as you know, the main challenge in transferring control to local entities in Gaza faces obvious opposition from Hamas.
Bastien, thank you very much. Bastien Bory there, over in Dubai. Well, on aid into Gaza, UNRWA said today that one of its aid convoys was violently looted shortly after it entered Gaza. The organisation says that 98 trucks were seized, but the organisation does not specify who stole them. Meanwhile, Israel's hardline finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, says that the Israeli army is to blame for not assuming the responsibility of distributing aid in Gaza in order to prevent it from falling into the hands of Hamas. Smotrich has also called for Israel to keep security control in northern Gaza and use that control as leverage to try and secure the release of the hostages, 101 people still being held by terrorists in Gaza. Well, Doron Avital is still with me in the studio. So, Doron, I mean, first of all, on the UNRWA statement, I mean, it's absurd. They won't say who stole the aid. We know who stole the aid. It was clearly Hamas. Why won't they say who stole the aid?
Yeah, it's strange. People with weapons, the Hamas operative, there's no question about that. And this is the problem with the humanitarian aid, the distribution, and the fact that it's being looted, and the fact that it's even distributed for money, and this gives Hamas financial gains. But this is the tricky thing. The distribution, this is the main bottleneck. Now, how to do it? So there are many ventures, even ventures of like civil pilots of trying to create those zones, gated zones, like the way, by the way, the Americans were doing in Iraq. And in those gated zones, you can deliver the humanitarian aid, and then the people would come and get it.
So the U.S. Army was distributing the aid?
It wasn't distributed that. He was creating those gated neighborhoods, and then there would be a center. He would provide security, and then the citizens would come and.
So why not do that in Gaza?
So the whole thing of the day after, this is the dilemma. You talked about Ron Dermer going to the Emirates and so on. This is tricky because in some sense the dilemma is whether in the end we want to stay in Gaza. Because if we're in the occupied power of Gaza, we have to take all the civil responsibilities and so on. Israel proclaimed that we don't want to do this. This is our official position. We've been occupying Gaza in the past. We took a lot of toll because of that. It was
so how can Israel defeat, sorry to interrupt, but how can Israel defeat Hamas if they are brazenly stealing aid?
Exactly. On the other hand, if you want to create a new day after, you have to do it with whom? Now, to do it with other Palestinian Authority, this is the path that we see Bibi is trying to navigate. This way he sends Ron Dermer. This would be hard. I think this would be a hard call. I don't think the Saudis or the Emirates would play along with any financial getting into Gaza without them seeing the Palestinian Authority as a player in creating this new day after in Gaza. So a dilemma, and I don't think it's solved, and I don't think anybody has a clear picture.
And just briefly on Smotrich's idea of seizing parts of Gaza.
Yes, Smotrich represents...
And using it as leverage.
And it's interesting when Trump would enter, it's interesting to see the dilemma because Smotrich is pushing for annexation of the Judean and Samaria, annexation of the northern Gaza as a way even farther, and to see whether Trump would play along, though he sends his team is very pro, even the Huckabee, for example. This is an ambassador who talks about the annexation of Judah and Samaria as a proven fact. Whether it's possible, whether the real play of Trump would be Saudi Arabia and to create this corridor and to create a new floor, if you want, of the Abraham Accord. Can he do it without in the end play along with do some concession to the Palestinians? This is, again, a dilemma not only for Bibi and Israel, but for Trump's administration coming in the future, in the very near future, in fact.
Doron, thank you very much. Well, Jordan's King Abdullah has sworn in the kingdom's new parliament following elections back in September. Islamist parties more than doubled their share of the vote, winning around a fifth of the total number of seats. Today, Abdullah told the parliament that he would continue to lobby for the end of the war in Gaza and would resist any attempts by Israel to displace Palestinians in the West Bank.
The future of Jordan would not be subject to policies that do not fulfill its interests. A just and honorable peace is a way to lift the historical injustice against our Palestinian brothers. We will not remain committed to it as an option that restores full rights to their owners and grants security to all, despite all the obstacles and extremism. Jordan stands firm against the aggression on Gaza and the Israeli violations in the West Bank, and we are working tirelessly through Arab and international efforts to stop this war.
Turkey has dismissed claims that Hamas is relocating there from Qatar. A diplomatic source said that although Hamas leaders regularly visited Turkey, there was no plan to move them there permanently. Last week, Qatar sought to clarify reports that it had ordered Hamas to leave, claiming instead that it had simply paused its role in negotiations to free the hostages. So what is going on? With me now, Sinan Sidi. He's a senior fellow on Turkey at the Foundation for the Defence of Democracies, the FDD. Thank you very much indeed for being with us, Sinan. So Turkey's government seems to be trying to do some kind of damage control today, would you say? They're trying to get on top of these reports. What do you think is happening exactly?
Right, so we saw reports emerging yesterday from unnamed officials. I think there was one unnamed Arab source suggesting that Turkey was going to step up to the plate to permanently locate Hamas outside of Qatar to Turkey. We obviously don't know the veracity of it, but now we're seeing the Turkish officials refute that, and that's based on, I'm assuming, from the anticipated pressure that they would feel by an incoming second Trump administration, which obviously is poised to be pretty staunchly in support of its Israeli ally, and Turkey does not want to face recriminations. But it's also, it should be acknowledged that, Turkey doesn't have to be, name it what you want. Hamas is already institutionally located inside of Turkey. It has been since 2011. There are offices, there are personnel, there are NGOs linked to Hamas, and they have official linkages to the sitting Turkish government with designated Turkish parliamentarians advocating on behalf of Hamas and securing meetings with the president And it doesn't have to be officially named for it to be in existence, which it already is right now.
So could you imagine President Erdogan taking that extra step then and hosting Hamas? Because that would win him points, wouldn't it, with Muslim Brotherhood supporters? It might not go down too well with incoming President Trump.
I mean, sure. I mean, he hasn't shied away from doing this in the past. To be honest, I don't actually know qualitatively what would change if he said we're now officially the home base for Hamas outside of Qatar, it wouldn't change because the incoming Trump White House and its proposed officials, for example, the Secretary of State, which is nominated as Marco Rubio if he's confirmed, or other senior national security professionals who might take up their posts, right? They already have commented on Turkey's extensive ties and position of Hamas inside of Turkey. They've expressed concerns in the past, even before they were nominated. My guess is the incoming...
Unfortunately, we've lost Sinan. Bit of a technical problem there. That was Sinan Sidi at the FDD. Well, Doron Avital is with me in the studio. That would create significant problems in the already very strained relationship between Israel and Turkey.
I think Turkey, he would play his cards very carefully and he would wait for Trump. Don't forget, Turkey is part of NATO, then you have the war of Ukraine, then European, the budgets of NATO, and then why would now he play along and host Hamas leaders? I think he's smarter than that. Turkey, as it is very critical of Israel, but to play along and try to host Hamas leaders right now, it makes little sense, I think, for him in this context. So at least not until Trump enters, and then we'll see where things go.
So what is your own take on what will happen to Hamas if they're kicked out of Qatar? The Qataris don't want to own up to it, but if they can't go to Turkey, what do you think?
As a political,
does it make a difference to Israel?
No, as a political organization, of course, they would exist like the way the Islamic Brotherhood exists, and they can play wherever they play. For us, what's important is, of course, to see that Hamas as a military wing is completely dismantled. We want to see Gaza demilitarized, of course. But then, of course, we have to take into account, like in every occupied territory, that in the end, some third or fourth circle of Hamas-related personnel would be part of the day after in Gaza. I think I want to mention the audience that in Iraq, once the officers of Saddam's army were kicked out after the U.S. invasion to Iraq, we found them forming ISIS. So it's not that smart to...
And of course, Iran moved in.
Exactly, and Iran stepped into the south, and more than that, of course. So you have to be, in this balance of powers, you have to play it clever. And I think Israel should think very thoroughly what to do with Gaza. I don't think occupying Gaza would be smart. And we have to think how to establish a new Gaza with the help of our allies. Of course, the allies that we have peace with, Egypt, Jordan, and of course the Emirates. And then I think the play of Trump, the main play of Trump in the Middle East, has one headline: Saudi Arabia. So this would be the play, and everything would be derived out of that. So it's all connected to this move that he would play with trying to create this corridor as a counterbalance also in terms of China, and the whole move would be the normalization of Saudi Arabia.
Do you think that there is a plan, and do you think that Israel risks being too dependent on other partners in the region, particularly the normalization deal that it's hoping to get with Saudi Arabia? And we know that Gideon Saar, who's now the defense minister, he's very skeptical about that, and he's made comments recently saying that he's not sure we should rely too much on that.
Yeah, in terms also of some, not concessions, some in terms of the nuclear program of Saudi Arabia, in terms of the civil nuclear program of Saudi Arabia. Sure, we are an independent state. We have to play it carefully. I think the great hope that the Israelis had for Trump administration, they might find a player that would treat them maybe more as a dependent entity than this equal treatment that they got with Biden. It will be interesting to see. But I think also from our interest, normalization of Saudi Arabia is critical. This is the major Islamic country, hosts the holiest places for Islam, and to have a peace with Saudi Arabia, this is a dream that the founders of this country would have never dreamt of. But this would mean going forward with the Palestinians to some kind of arrangement. I'm not sure, I don't want to call it names, but this is the price Israel would have to pay. pay. And I think this coalition, it would be hard for this coalition to accept such a price. So watch out for Saudi and what would be the move of Trump with Saudi Arabia.
Right, because the Saudis have made it clear they want some kind of path to a Palestinian state.
Clean and clear.
But it's not just this government in Israel. I mean, if you look at the polls, no one in Israel.
Of course, but you know, polls.
A tiny fringe would be interested in even discussing a Palestinian state right now.
But polls can shift. The question is the key political players right now in this current coalition, whether this current coalition can withstand a major move of Saudi Arabia, as they proclaim they are for it, of course, Bibi himself. But Bibi all the time believed, prior to the 7th of October, that they can do this move and bypass the Palestinian. In many respects, the 7th of October was a stop sign to this idea that you can make this move and bypass the Palestinian.
They have to be involved in the process.
They have to be. They live here. What can we do?
And of course, let's not forget that President Trump had a plan for Palestinian statehood.
Sure.
The Palestinians.
Exactly. This was the great deal of the century that didn't come about yet. Okay. But who knows? Maybe
we'll wait and see.
We'll wait and see. Exactly.
Doron, thank you. Well, we're going to go back to Sinan Sidi at the FDD. We were talking about Turkey because there are reports that Turkey might host what is left of the Hamas leadership. A diplomatic source in Turkey denying those reports today. And Sinan, we were talking about whether you could imagine President Erdogan taking that extra step and accepting to host Hamas.
I mean, I would just reflect and say I'm not sure he needs to do anything to take an extra step or not. I mean, fundamentally, Hamas exists in a significant capacity inside of Turkey institutionally. You know, I would argue even as far as it exists as it does in Qatar, right? It has existed since 2011. It has offices. It has an active supporting government. It is able to fundraise, recruit, planning terrorist operations inside of Israel. We have seen 8 tranches of U.S. Treasury sanctions taken out against Turkish entities that have aided and abetted Hamas in the last 12 months, if not prior to that also. We have seen significant amount of fundraising and money transfers that go between Turkey and into Hamas's operating accounts in Gaza. I'm not sure what this, how this would be qualitatively different than what potentially happened. What actually happens in Turkey hitherto.
And I'm just wondering, are you seeing any sign of change in Erdogan's foreign policy, given that we've got President Trump taking power in January, and we know that Trump has spoken quite harshly about President Erdogan in the past? Are you seeing any changes in policy, perhaps in particular in relation to Turkey's land grab in Syria?
Nothing as of yet, as far as I can see. Initially, Erdogan was overjoyed with Trump's re-election into the White House. He actually called him and spoke to him on the telephone. But then as the sort of drip of nominations has started to come in about who some of these national security and foreign policy staffers will be inside of Trump's White House, including Secretary of State, the nominee Marco Rubio, but also Secretary of Defense, but also Director of National Intelligence here. These nominations have all historically had problems with Turkey's positioning towards sort of critical Middle East portfolio that the United States considers. And they may make Erdogan's life very difficult. We know Marco Rubio has really been sharply critical of Turkish foreign policy, not just in relation to Hamas and Gaza, but also Turkey's attitude towards Russia, also Turkey's posture, as you say, in terms of northern Syria, where Turkey has been continuing to attack and launch military strikes against U.S. allies or U.S. partners, I should say, in the Syrian Democratic Forces. Unless Erdogan really does some soul searching and reconsideration of his priorities, he may be in hot water, but he also may be calculating that essentially he may be able to get Trump to buy into his sort of worldview, but we'll have to see.
Sinan, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Sinan Sidi there at the FDD. Well, Russia vetoed a UN Security Council resolution on Monday calling for an immediate end to hostilities in Sudan. The war there has been raging since April 2023. It has killed at least 62,000 people and displaced millions. Now a cholera outbreak threatens survivors. Our Nasrin Nassar has this report.
19 months of war in Sudan, civilians still being killed and displaced, and to top that, a cholera epidemic has now broken out. According to the Sudanese Ministry of Health, the number of cholera cases has risen more than 24,500 and includes 699 deaths, while the disease has spread to 11 of Sudan's 18 states.
There are a large number of people who arrive suffering from the disease, and we have more people in the other section. For now, the situation in the area of New Halfa is not as bad. The large numbers of arrivals come from the Radaga area.
As a result of the severe shortage of health services and the appropriate conditions for practicing normal daily life, the cholera epidemic spread significantly.
The health situation here is very poor, frankly. More than 300 people, or about 250 people, use 3 bathrooms that are almost primitive.
We suffered traveling during 3 days. We walked on foot a distance of 100 kilometers until we found cars to take us here. We traveled day and night for 3 days.
Despite the efforts of the government and the contributions of the charitable people of New Halfa and organization, the conditions of the displaced still pose a challenge to the city and unbearable humanitarian tragedy.
Well, let's zoom in now on the strategic Horn of Africa region. Egypt continues to send troops to Somalia as part of what it says is a peacekeeping mission. Somalia and Egypt have deepened ties in order to counter Ethiopia's plans to build a giant dam, a dam that Cairo says presents an existential threat. Well, Ethiopia, meanwhile, has been developing ties with the breakaway region of Somaliland. It wants access to the sea, and Somaliland just held elections. Well, to talk more about all of that, Mariam Waba is an analyst at the FDD. Good to have you with us, Mariam. So is this strategy working out for Egypt so far? Has it deterred Ethiopia in its plans to build this huge dam?
Great to be with you today, Laura. Look, this is there's a few things to remember when it comes to this issue, and one is that this is not a new issue. Since September, we've seen Egypt be provocative in this sphere. There have been unconfirmed reports that Egypt has already troops on the ground, and we know that Egypt has already sent weapons to Somalia. Now, to your question, has this strategy worked? Have we seen it work out well for Cairo? The answer is somewhat tricky. Egypt's moves have escalated things with Ethiopia. We saw the two nations exchange letters at the UN Security Council just a few weeks ago. And Egypt has begun to court other allies in the region like Eritrea. Looking forward, there's a couple things we need to be watching out for. We can anticipate seeing more of these nations become more assertive as they near the December 31st expiration date of that African Union tribes mandate.
Well, some analysts say that all of these shifting alliances could embolden al-Shabaab. This is the al-Qaeda-linked group that has been causing a lot of bloodshed in Somalia and the region in recent years. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Certainly, that fear is palpable. Given the unpredictable nature of this region, particularly Somalia, where there's a very strong al-Shabaab hold on the region, things can get complicated pretty quickly. If we recall that weapon shipment back to Somalia, there is fear that those weapons, and they include things like anti-craft weapons and ammunitions, could land in the hands of al-Shabaab, and that poses a risk to the region.
Mariam Waba, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, just to give you an update on the latest from the north, where Hezbollah has fired around 100 rockets today. A woman has tragically been killed, a civilian, after a direct hit on an Arab-Israeli town in the north. This was the village of Shfaram. We're hearing that the woman was in her 50s and was declared dead at the scene after she was pulled from the rubble of a 3-story building that collapsed when it was hit by a Hezbollah missile. Several other people were wounded. Doron Avital with me in the studio. Devastating turn of events in the north today.
To mention, Shfaram is a Muslim, Arab Muslim, and also, I think it's also Christian in the Galilee, and she was really, I think she was even in the protected area, and then she found her death. This is a terrible tragedy. I do hear right now that Hochstein might come tomorrow. I heard some.
Oh, he's put it back on again.
Yeah, it's like back and forth. Who knows?
Yes.
But it depends on that. But this is, we have to understand that also we have, of course, a vested interest in having some agreement as long as we can be enforced, because we need to bring our citizens back, and the citizens need to conduct impact their life. We have a real problem of citizens that might reconsider whether to go back to their homes and go back to their life in the north, and we can't give up on the north. So this is we have a really interest also. It's not like we are forced to this ceasefire by the US, by the Americans, because the Lebanese, of course, are excited to end this cycle of...
Which was the situation in Gaza. Israel was saying it didn't want to have a ceasefire.
I think right now we want to decouple the two fronts. We want to conclude the north and then see what's with Gaza. Gaza is a complicated issue the day after, and of course the terrible, terrible tragedy of our hostages that are kept there, and then the winter is coming now, so it's tricky.
Yeah, really sad. And I mean, to think that in just one day 100 missiles fired at civilian areas in Israel is
you can't conduct any real life there, and of course you're all the time under threat to be hit and be killed as this poor lady.
All right, so a woman in her 50s has been killed after a Hezbollah missile strike on her village, the Arab town of Shfaram, up in the Galilee in the north of Israel. Well, our Zach Anders is live at the scene, and he will be joining Benita Levin as she brings you the rundown next. Stay with us. This is I24 News. Thanks for watching. Good night.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
Want to stay on top of the news no matter where you are?
Introducing I24 News' brand new news website.
On our website, you'll find all the latest articles, interviews, and live broadcasts. Everything you need to know right at your fingertips, whenever you want it.
So what are you waiting for? Download the I24 News app today.
Shalom. ¿Qué me trae por aquí? La necesidad impostergable de 600 millones de hispanoparlantes que ahora necesitan escuchar el mensaje judío e israelí en tiempos difíciles. ¿Cómo lograrlo? Cuento con ustedes para continuar llevando a lo más alto del mundo mediático una inquebrantable diplomacia pública al servicio de la verdad sin concesión alguna.
This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Benita Levine, and we start with breaking news. Hezbollah has today launched more than 100 rockets at residential parts of northern Israel. Confirmation just a short while ago that one woman has been killed and several people wounded after a building was hit in the northern Arab town of Shfaram in the most recent attack. Now, the Israeli Air Force continues targeting terror sites in southern Lebanon as Hezbollah keeps showing its solidarity with Hamas in Gaza, day 409 of the war. Tens of thousands of Israeli residents evacuated from their homes for more than a year now are still waiting to see if the Israeli ground and air operation in Lebanon will successfully eliminate the ongoing terror threat. So for the latest on this breaking news, we go straight to our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us from the Arab town of Shfaram in northern Israel. A fatal Hezbollah strike. Zach, what more can you tell us?
Yeah, that casualty count has increased. It's now 12 injuries. And as you mentioned, a woman in her 50s has been pronounced dead on scene. In the last hour's update, we were speaking of initial reports of a woman trapped inside of a building near the site of this rocket impact. It's now since been announced that that woman who was trapped in the building is the one pronounced dead on scene. The National Ambulance Service said that they arrived to the scene and were searching a 4-story building. It was on the top floor that they found a female in her 50s with multiple injuries, unconscious, no pulse, not breathing, declared dead on scene. This is a very complicated area to it, not only for the fact that the streets are very dense and compact, the homes are very close together, the apartments very close together, but right now there are hundreds of people that are out in this area, and the police have set up multiple blocks along the road, so difficult to get close right now and to be able to see any of the damage. And that street itself has lost power, so it's dark. We're not able to see down it with our cameras. But again, the initial reports came in of 6 casualties. That has now been increased to 12. We don't have a full condition report for the other injuries, but it is believed that there are some serious injuries among the 12 that the ambulance service here is saying are injured. Actually, let me retract that and say that continuing on this statement, the National Ambulance Service said 10 mildly injured casualties who walked out of these buildings on their own power. My mistake. That was relying on earlier initial reports. The latest we have now, 1 fatality and an additional 10 mildly injured. We'll work to track down with this latest report from the National Ambulance Service that the total number of casualties is 12. Trying to understand if those 2 other injuries are serious or not, Benita. But again, these scenes, they strike you a bit because these are Arab majority areas, and these are not Jewish towns, and to know that they over the last week have been hit by this direct rocket fire. Earlier last week when we were in Kiryat Atta, very similar direct impact from a rocket, multiple injuries there in another Arab majority neighborhood. So these rockets, they don't differentiate who they're falling on. Certainly not up here.
Certainly not the case. Hezbollah targeting Israelis, and as you are reporting, that confirmation, 1 woman killed in that last rocket attack, several injuries. We will be coming back to our correspondent Zach Anders for regular updates. For now, thank you very much, Zach, in northern Israel. Now, for more, we welcome to studio Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, former military secretary to 3 Israeli ministers of defense and a former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF. Eitan, thank you so much for being here. We start the show with this tragic news. A woman in her 50s, an Israeli woman in a building when it was struck, has been killed, several injuries. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. Tragedy, and you can add it to the price that the Israeli civilians are paying for this kind of war. Hezbollah has its excuse that he launching or attacking military area, but in fact you see how many civilians are striking by Hezbollah, and of course all the area of the north part is including many Arab Israeli villages that are paying the price. First of all, I would like to bring my feelings to the family. Secondly, I think that we should investigate what's going with the fact that recently we can look and see that some of those rockets that are launching by Hezbollah, they are not launching a lot. 100, according to compare to what happened at the beginning, it was 200, 250. We are approximately around 100 rockets, but take in account that each kind of shooting has between 10 to 30 or 40 rockets in one launcher. So it means this is using as one offensive attack, and we have to see why in this kind of circumstances 1 or 2 or 3 succeed to enter the air defense system on the sky and not be destroyed on the air. Secondly, we have to be and to make it very clear, Hezbollah didn't lose his all capabilities. He still held his capabilities with rocket, with, as we see, drones and these kind of things. But when you are looking on the general situation in the north, you can see for sure Israel is controlling almost half of the area of South Lebanon, threatening till the north part of South Lebanon, till the area of Litani. The offensive activities by the ground forces, underground and up the ground, is making a dramatic way of military activity, destroying all the infrastructure that were built there and with the arms. Secondly, Beirut, Nabatia in the south of the central south of Lebanon, Baalbek are striking by Israel with the fact that we have closure from the sea and from the area for Syria to prevent. So when you are calculating military situation, I think that we are on a very pressing situation, but Hezbollah is still its capabilities to react by rockets and drones, and we have to continue our alert.
Its capabilities are abundantly clear, including, of course, from that report from Zach Anders. There are, at the same time, a ton conflicting reports about Amos Hochstein visiting. He was reportedly going to be in Beirut tomorrow. Then there are reports that the U.S. envoy is waiting until there's more progress in terms of ceasefire talks. What do you read into these conflicting reports?
I think that we are watching now two ways that are running without stopping each the other, unless they will found or meeting in a work point that will be led by the political line. The political line is very clear. United States centralized all what is looking to make the new agreement, but under few conditions. What we have to do, this is the new circumstances, the new reality in Lebanon that we have to continue as Israel has to protect its own civilians. And there are two things there. First, who will be the head of observe the situation south of Lebanon to make sure Hezbollah is not there. Secondly, after such circumstances that entering, Israel keep for itself the right to be active even if it will not, under the situation, it will not be solved by this kind of committee. On the other hand, Israel, in a right way, continue very strong offensive attacks and be like, last but not least, last example, in Beirut, you see moving outside by striking from the very clear area of Dahya is belong to the Hezbollah. We are moving to other areas. It means the leaders of Lebanon has to be much more rapidly reacted and to look on their own country, not about Hezbollah.
Certainly much to ponder, some major decisions to be made as well. We'll talk a bit more about that in a short while. Right now, we're turning to a highly unusual lawsuit in the United States. 256 families have filed a lawsuit in a federal court against Tehran to hold them accountable for their role in the Hamas terror onslaught in southern Israel on the 7th of October. More in this report by our Lynn Plachmeier.
Families of October 7 victims have filed a lawsuit against Iran and its proxies in a U.S. federal court. The backbone for this claim? Unveiling secret Hamas papers which allegedly proves Tehran's involvement in the attack. These documents have been uncovered by lawyer Gary Osen and are believed to show the Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps funneling millions of dollars to Hamas. Furthermore, the complaint also includes a document from a 2022 meeting of senior Hamas members Yahya Sinwar, Khalil al-Haya and others plotting out a defense agreement between Hamas and other Iranian-backed groups in case a war were to break out. The paper includes a decision to request $7 million monthly from Iran to Hamas to, quote, mobilize and prepare for confrontations for the big project, as it was called. Besides Iran and Hamas, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine are also being sued. Left out of the suit are U.S. allies Qatar and Turkey, who've also been accused of funding Hamas. Yemen's Houthi rebels are also excluded from the suit. The plaintiffs consist of 256 families, of whose family members were killed or kidnapped on October 7. Other plaintiffs include families from southern Israel who suffered emotionally during or after the attack, or families of soldiers who were killed in combat. Among them is Yechiel Leiter, who is set to become Israel's ambassador to the U.S. His son Moshe Leiter was killed in Gaza fighting in November 2023. The victims and their families seek financial compensation for their suffering. In similar cases, Iran has never showed up to defend itself and therefore allowing the plaintiffs to win.
And now for more on this extraordinary case, we welcome Lee Wolosky, partner and co-chair at litigation at Jenner and Block LLP. He joins us now live from New York. Lee, thank you so much for your time, for your insights too on this important lawsuit. The families of American victims of October 7th and of course those killed in subsequent fighting are suing Iran, accusing it of supporting the deadliest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. What light can you shed right now on the evidence showing how Iran has been funding Hamas and other terror organizations?
Well, first, thank you very much for having me. I think we all knew the broad outlines of Iranian support for Hamas and other terror groups. But as lawyers, we need documents. We need evidence that will hold up in court. And that's now what we have. Because of our access to captured Hamas documents, we are able to have the type of evidence that shows irrefutable payments by Iran to Hamas in the lead up to October 7th. We are able to see Iranian efforts to coordinate a broader assault on Israel than the one that ultimately devastatingly took place on October 7th. And to have the type of evidence that we can use in a court of law to hold the perpetrators accountable.
And what kind of compensation is being sought here? What are the realistic timeframes as well? It sounds like it could take years, if not decades.
Well, this is only the beginning. So this is only the first lawsuit of many to come. As evidence becomes available, again, the type of documentary evidence that could be used in a court. And we expect this campaign to proceed for many years as additional evidence, including, as you indicated, other actors, Qataris, Turkish entities, et cetera. As the evidence becomes available of direct financial support to Hamas, we will seek to hold those parties accountable in the courts in the United States. You know, even transactions that had nothing to do with the United States, again, to use your example, Qatari or Turkish entities transferring money into Gaza. If those were U.S. dollar transactions, they pass through New York, and the U.S. courts routinely will accept jurisdiction of claims like that. So this is the beginning of a long effort. We've started with Iran. That usually results in what's called a default judgment, and the families are able to use that default judgment to go and collect money from a U.S. government fund. that's been set up to fund claims against state sponsors of terror like Iran.
And Lee, when you look back at previous instances where victims of terror attacks led by Iran have tried to sue in American courts, how confident are you that this lawsuit will be successful, however long it takes?
Well, again, as to the Iranians, we're very confident because, as you pointed out in your intro, the Iranians do not show up in U.S. courts to defend themselves. So we will be able to get a default judgment that will entitle our clients, U.S. citizens and their family members, to either collect money from a U.S. government fund or to go out and try to seize Iranian assets around the world. Again, something we have done successfully in other contexts, specifically for 9/11 families. But the longer process will be against other defendants, not the Iranians. Other defendants frequently show up in court. And they fight long, hard battles against the victims of terror attacks.
Well, we certainly will be watching with keen interest. Lee Wolosky, partner and co-chair of litigation at Jenner & Block LLP, live from New York. Thank you so much for being with us on The Rundown.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, certainly fascinating. We keep on hearing security experts like yourself talking about Iran as the head of the octopus when it comes to terror around the world, certainly in the Middle East. And here you have this extraordinary case in the United States against Iran.
Absolutely. And from my also experience and knowledge, it's not the first time that Iran is brought to the court in the United States by those who were damaged and eaten from terror activities. And I think that Iran considers very deeply this kind of activities because it has a lot of impact on the way Iran is using the foreign countries like United States in others in order to make its activities and using technology and other kind and also economical activities. And there is a lot of, I think, way that Iran will be very careful in this kind of court because it has meaning on money. And money is one of the main building for the power of terrorism all over the world, and above it there is the Iranian head, warhead and head that is using it.
We certainly will be watching, and as Lee alluded to, potentially down the line, other nations as well will be targeted. Stay with us. We've got much more to discuss right now, though. Families of the hostages still in captivity are still waiting for answers. Day 409 of the war. Hamas has yet to provide proof of life to confirm how many of the hostages are alive. Now, one of the Israeli hostages is 80-year-old Gadi Moses, abducted from Nir Oz on the 7th of October. He is still in Hamas captivity. And now we welcome Yair Moses, son of Gadi. He joins us from Hadera. Yair, we so appreciate you speaking to us. We cannot imagine what you and your family are going through. Time is of the essence. Still no deal at this point. Your mom, Margalit, was, of course, also abducted on the 7th of October, but was released in that first truce deal in November. How are you doing? How are you all managing right now?
Well, it's getting harder every day, every hour. From day to day, the struggle to believe that my father and the others are still alive is getting very hard, and it's almost impossible to believe it. But we must hold with our finger points and believe that he's still alive, and many others are still alive. And we do whatever we can in order for something to happen, and some agreement will be arranged, and they will be back, hopefully, as soon as possible.
And your dad had appeared in one of the Hamas propaganda videos back in December, 11 months ago now. What more have you heard since on his health? What is the most recent update as such you've had, either from freed or rescued hostages? What are you learning?
This is the only sign of life we have for him. We don't know anything about him. No one of the released people saw him. We don't know if he's being held by himself or with others. We don't know if he's underground or in private houses. We don't know if he's got any food, medicines, and actually we don't even know if he's alive or not. But we must believe that he is, and continue. I don't see another option. Continue all the time until he and all the others will be back with us.
And of course, time is of the essence. We've been saying that for so long now. Today, it's been raining in the region. Winter is approaching. And then there's this emotional roller coaster with reports of meetings in Tel Aviv with Mossad Chief David Barnea, and then other meetings as well. What message would you want to have right now for those decision makers?
But they must do whatever is possible to bring them, and this must be number one priority of everyone in Israel, and that it's not that just family issues, and actually it's not just Israel issues. All the world need to understand that this is pure humanitarian thing, and it's not part of the conflict. We cannot connect the hostages situation to the conflict between the Israel and the Palestinians. It's pure humanity, and the world cannot allow any organization, as cruel as they are, to kidnap people and demand things for them and related to the conflict. Just people, my father is 80 years old. We have still 7 women there. We don't know what happened to them. We heard many evidence, and the world need to decide that they cannot accept it and demand their immediate release.
And you have in the past also described your dad as mentally strong and as physically strong. As we're speaking to you, we're seeing pictures of him as well, 80 years old. To think that he's been in captivity for more than a year now. Tell us a bit about him. Tell us about the neshama, the spirit, the soul of your father.
Oh, my father is an amazing man. I am a bit biased, but yeah, he's been a farmer all his life. A great father and great grandfather to all of his kids, even the kids of his partner Efrat, grandchildren of Efrat. He treated them as his own grandchildren. For more than 30 years now, has been traveling around the world and lecture about agriculture in developing countries. All the pictures you see now is from places he's been actually all over the world. He's been in Africa, in South America, in the Far East. Did it from the true believing that this will improve their lives, teaching them how to do better agriculture. A lecture in his stall, he could have the patience to answer all questions. It doesn't matter if it's a group of professor from the university or group of kindergarten children. He will answer all questions, adjust the level of the explanation to the listeners, and he loves people. He's a man of people and land, we say in Hebrew. It sounds better, but he's really, really a man that love to help people, love people, and love the ground. I said also that my mother and then Efrat were his second wife, because the soil and the fields are his first wife always.
We certainly can see that from the photographs we're looking at while you are speaking, and we certainly hope for good news. The heart of the nation is with you. Strength to you, your mom, your family, all the grandchildren you're talking about. We're thinking of you all. Yair Moses, thank you very much for being with us on the Rundown.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
409 days in captivity, 80 years old. Now, in other news, Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel's retaliatory attack on Iran last month degraded its defense and missile production capabilities and also hit an element of its nuclear program. The Prime Minister also telling Parliament today Iran's path to a nuclear weapon has not been blocked. Now, last week, the Axios news site revealed that Israel destroyed an active nuclear weapons research facility in Parshin during that retaliatory attack on Iran. Here's more from the Prime Minister.
It's not a secret. It has been published. There is a specific component in their nuclear program that was hit in the attack, but still, the nuclear program itself, its ability to act, has not yet been thwarted, but we delayed it. 10 years ago, Iran was where it is today with all the actions we did, also in the operational field and also in the political field. We moved Iran back by a decade, but it made progress and still has a roadmap, and the test is on us.
Major General in the Reserves Eitan Dangot is still here in studio. Netanyahu also saying Israel will reevaluate its ability to act against Iran's nuclear program once Donald Trump takes office in January. Your thoughts?
Yes, this is, I think, one of the major or the main goal of Israel. Doesn't matter who is the president of the United States, by the way. It has started on the beginning of the 90s, and it's still now. And as I see it now, Iran is already in the red line. In my point of view, we have to look on Iran as a new clear capacities. The question is what and how to do. The question is how to prepare your steps before Donald Trump is entering in 1.5 months to the White House. The issue is, first of all, I think that the Prime Minister described in his words things that were published, of course, and shows Israel has a lot of intelligence, Israel has a lot of capabilities to touch or to strike or to destroy these places. Secondly, Israel is not to stop it for 1 second. The issue is not be alone, in my opinion. How you organize with you the support, of course, and the involvement led by United States, European countries like Britain, France, Germany, and the most important countries is the moderate Arab countries. And I think that we are in a junction that one end you see that Iran stopped his threats towards Israel for a while. We have to be in alert. But Iran is looking like they are not there. Secondly, Iran is involved what will be with his proxies. And the third point will be whether Israel will achieve a ceasefire in the north as a one step above to prepare Trump to enter and to touch this subject in his way of policy with Israel together. Alone, it will be much more difficult.
Certainly we'll be waiting to see how other countries respond, and obviously as well to see if Iran does in fact try to conduct yet another direct strike. Many questions remain. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, stay with us. We've got much more to discuss, though right now we're taking a very quick break. When we get back, Canadian authorities have foiled an Iranian attempt to assassinate well-known Jewish jurist Erwin Kotler, a former Canadian Justice Minister and Attorney General. Our coverage continues. Stay tuned.
You live in Israel or you are preparing for your Aliyah? Congratulations. You have a smartphone? Perfect. Download the Olim app for free and discover everything we have to offer. Booking medical and administrative appointments, bills paying, debt verification, instant translation, contractor recommendation, request tracking, and much more. And if you can't manage it on your own, our team speaks your language and assists you with all your procedures in Israel, starting from 199 shekels per month, unlimited and for the whole family. Don't hesitate any longer. Download the app or contact us.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back to The Rundown. Canadian authorities have foiled an Iranian attempt to assassinate well-known Jewish jurist Irwin Cotler, a former Canadian Justice Minister and Attorney General. The Globe and Mail reporting that Cotler was told late last month that he faced an imminent threat of assassination. It said the Royal Canadian Mounted Police had been tracking 2 suspects, and it's now believed that threat has been significantly lowered. Now, Cotler is recognized globally as an expert on free speech, freedom of religion, minority rights, peace law, and war crimes justice. He has close ties to Israel, and it's believed the regime in Tehran was furious over his efforts since 2008 to have the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps declared a terrorist organization. So for more on this extraordinary story, we welcome to studio Michal Kotler-Wunsch, Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism, a public policy and strategy advisor. And in your capacity right now, Michal, welcome. This is your father we are talking about. My first question, an Iranian plot to assassinate him in Canada. How is he?
So first of all, it's very important for me to say, and I've gotten so many messages, as has my father, and the love that's out there, of course, just to say that he is, thankfully, and thank God, okay. The plot was foiled. He is under continued surveillance, 24-hour police protection, as he has been for months. And what I want to say that's especially important in your introduction of him, it's 100% true that he was Canada's Justice Minister. Most importantly for me to say, under this sort of circumstance, is that he is a human rights warrior.
Right.
He has championed the freedom of thousands around the world. He has given voice to the voiceless. He has pursued justice with justice as Canada's Justice Minister. And for me, at this moment in time, there is not a Canadian that should not be shocked by the fact that he is under house arrest, essentially. The person who fought for the freedom, who represented so many, is under house arrest in none other than Canada. And beyond Canadians, for all of us who cherish freedom and humanity and the dignity of difference, this should be a shocking moment, though it is unsurprising, because it is part and parcel of that tsunami of anti-Semitism that we have seen, that has been fueled by none other than Iran, which you mentioned in the latter part of your introduction of the issue. The fact that the genocidal Islamic regime in Iran and its genocidal proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, that have waged this war in Israel, have received the, I'm going to say, support of those pro-Hamas rallies, pro-terror rallies, pro-Iran rallies, because they are not pro-Palestinian. Anybody who is pro-Palestinian would be calling to free the people of Gaza from Hamas, and to free the people of Lebanon from Hezbollah, and to free the people of Iran from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's what true human rights advocates should be advocating. Instead, what we have seen is a tsunami of anti-Semitism that has been silent, that has denied, that has justified the atrocities of October the 7th and the war raging since, and that has attacked Jews around the world, in Amsterdam, in Paris, in Montreal, including this foiled attempt on the life of my father.
And Michal, this attempt was foiled, at least the details were made public as of today. You talk about the silence since the 7th of October in many parts of the world, deafening silence for many. What has the reaction been like to the fact that there was an Iranian plot to assassinate him?
So it's so important for me to say, especially when I speak to my counterparts, special envoys for combating anti-Semitism from around the world, this is shocking, but it cannot be surprising. If we keep looking at each one of these incidents as a standalone event, then maybe we are surprised. But they are not standalone events. They are part and parcel of this, as I said, tsunami of anti-Semitism that has included the responses to October the 7th and the war raging since, including just tonight, a woman killed and 10 injured in an attack by Hezbollah from Lebanon each rocket intended to murder Israelis, of the thousands of rockets that have been launched in Israel. And so if we are surprised, we fail to understand the urgency and the gravity of the situation in which the tsunami of anti-Semitism, once again, that mutates over thousands of years, not only endangers Jews, not only is an existential threat to the Jewish nation state that is the state of Israel, once again, anti-Semitism is the most reliable sign of the real threat, a major threat to humanity, to freedom, and to the dignity of difference. That's what this moment in time is. We have to stop being surprised. We have to begin to act, to identify and combat anti-Semitism and all of its strains as defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition, including the demonization, the delegitimization, and the double standards applied to the state of Israel, the Jew among the nations. Without that, we will not be able to put back the genie in the bottle, because what we have seen is that anti-Semitism did not die in Auschwitz, it just mutated once again.
And we keep on hearing more and more about the Iranian tentacles, how far they reach. Michal Kotler-Wunsch, we're very pleased to hear that your father is safe and well. Thank you very much for being here in studio. Israel's Special Envoy for Combating Anti-Semitism. Always appreciate your time and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, a new UN report claims that 70% of those killed in the war in Gaza have been women and children. The report, which heavily criticizes Israel, has made headlines around the world. But with less than 20% of the total number of fatalities in Gaza actually verified, many analysts are questioning not just the methodology and the conclusions in this report, but also the intent. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini digs deeper.
Images of bodies in bloody blankets after another Israeli attack in Gaza. Young Israeli soldiers forced into a terrible but necessary war, killed in combat. Heartbreaking reports of civilian suffering and death. The stories from the ground in Gaza are tough, but they're also drowning in misinformation, falsehoods, and different narratives. The international community listens to the United Nations. This Friday, the UN issued a report saying nearly 70% of those killed in Gaza were women and children. The Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza reports that around 44,000 people have been killed since the beginning of the war. Not distinguishing between fighters and civilians, they claim most are women and children. But less than 20% of the total number of deaths in the war has been independently verified so far. By September 2024, the UN Human Rights Council had been able to confirm 8,119 deaths.
As of now, we have about 10,000 fatalities that we have verified, including 4,700 children, that's about 45%, and 2,461 women, that's about 25%. So the overall 70% women and children remains for now.
When they say children, it's everyone under 18, and we know that there's a clear trend for Hamas using child fighters. And if we look at the breakdown of the 43,344 that Hamas are claiming, we can see clear demographic spikes in males between the ages of about 15 and 50, which to me suggests that the IDF are targeting males, which suggests they're targeting fighters.
Gaza's authorities are almost entirely run by Hamas, and the ongoing war makes the independent identification process difficult, causing many statisticians and analysts to question the accuracy of the numbers presented in the report.
The next thing we need to look at is the methodology the UN have used for this report. They've only looked at 8,119 names. And they've said they're verified, which is also very tricky because any verification that takes place in Gaza is clearly going to be tainted by Hamas. They still run a significant part of the Gaza Strip in spite of the IDF's best efforts.
The UN stands by the numbers.
The MOH figures compared with ours in the last escalation, several escalations have matched and they've come very close. So we do not have reasons to believe that this time it's very different. The numbers are, of course, massive compared to previous years, so we do need time to catch up and verify.
The UN based the verification on having 3 independent sources or witnesses to a death, typically neighbors or family members. Almost 90% of their verified fatalities were from large incidents, where at least 5 people were killed.
And what that specifically excludes is any events where casualties were incurred with no witnesses, i.e. people who were in combat with the IDF at the time of dying. So it's a heavily skewed report. And as I said, totally at odds even with Hamas's own numbers.
According to Andrew Fox, the report speaks to a larger issue, the anti-Israel narrative that permeates the UN.
Hamas seem to have been completely deleted from the conversation. It's as if there's a war happening in Gaza just because, and there was nothing behind it, and there's nobody being fought, and it's just Israel going in and blowing huge chunks of Rafah or Khan Yunis or Gaza City off the map for reasons that are kind of unspecified. And it's a very strange narrative. So when they say verified and then they drop 70% in there, it's such a clearly anti-Israel bias.
Israel claims around 18,000 Hamas members have been killed in the war and says approximately 1 civilian has been killed for every fighter, a number it blames on Hamas, showing repeatedly that Hamas hides in hospitals, schools, and homes, using civilians as human shields.
Meanwhile, a convoy of more than 100 trucks has been looted crossing into Gaza on Sunday through the Kerem Shalom crossing. A senior officer at UNRWA telling Reuters that 98 trucks of aid was lost as a result, although the official doesn't say who was responsible for the looting. Now, Israel has long been raising concerns that Hamas is hijacking humanitarian aid meant for Palestinian civilians. This latest report highlighting some of the challenges of bringing aid into the Strip. Still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot. We've been talking about misinformation, disinformation. Here we have a report of looting involving 98 trucks of aid and food that has come into Gaza. No clarity on who was behind the looting at this juncture. Your assessment?
First of all, it shows you what's going in Gaza. It means that Hamas is still controlling the transportation and the support for the civil, for the population. They don't care for them. They are not looking, even let's say, if we are not making anything and still on the end of Hamas, and I know this kind of things very well from my position as the coordinator of the government activities in the territories, it means the Hamas is controlling for Hamas, for terrorism, for its own people, and for a type of people that support him in this kind of state. The issue will disappear all the organization that has a task and fulfill and demand a task like UNRWA to bring this kind of support over Gaza. And the third, I'm telling it even a bit sad, where is the Israeli program in order to use for almost a year the fact that this is the circumstances in Gaza and what kind of mechanism has to be built. Now I see only two options, Hamas or what the Prime Minister maybe described today in the Knesset, that he is willing that the IDF will show him a program how to control it. The meaning is Israel is on the way to be responsible for it, and this is a bad sign. It's a bad sign for the coming future years, and it's a bad sign for the hostages.
Devastating indeed. Many questions still remain about the latest developments inside the Gaza Strip. Eitan, stay with us. There's much more to discuss. It was a drone attack by Iranian-backed groups in Iraq intended to target Eilat in southern Israel, but one of Israel's interceptors malfunctioned and the defense system landed in Jordan. As Alan Plachmeier explains, the interceptor hit the coastal city of Aqaba. Let's take a look.
Overnight, the IDF has shot down a drone from Iraq targeting Eilat. The Iranian-backed Islamic resistance in Iraq has claimed the attack. Videos on social media showed the interception bolting into the sky before falling back down and landing near a hotel strip in the Jordan coastal city of Aqaba, just over the border with Israel. The malfunctioning interceptor reportedly landed next to a luxury development, causing 2 explosions. The Jordanian military confirmed that a, quote, flying object hit Aqaba, the kingdom's state-run Petra news agency reported. According to the news agency, there were no serious injuries or damages. The IDF hasn't commented. Jordan has been walking a tightrope between maintaining diplomatic ties with Israel and containing the anti-Israel sentiment among its population, which consists of a large group of people who are descended from Palestinian refugees. Despite efforts to quell the unrest among the Jordanian people, protests have erupted regularly in support of the Palestinian people, with most recently a hunger strike of 60 Jordanian men and women who are demanding the entry of 500 aid trucks into northern Gaza and an end to the siege on the Strip. 18 days in, a number of them have been hospitalized due to a drop in their blood sugar. And so, with the failed Israeli interceptions striking Jordan, more fuel has been added to the already raging fire which burns within the Hashemite kingdom.
Still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, and there certainly is an extraordinary sequence of events in this case. I'd like your take, though, on the threat that still exists, Iranian groups, Iranian-backed groups out of Iraq targeting Israel.
You can call it Iranian militias supporting Iran that were deployed in Iraq, in Yemen, and even trying to enter to some places in Jordan.
Okay, we are interrupting this answer right now because you may have heard that was an alert coming off of our phones. The Home Front Command is signaling that red alert sirens are sounding in Tel Aviv right now, and we have been told that sirens are sounding. We are going to be staying in the studio to keep bringing you coverage right now. Rocket alert sirens sounding in Tel Aviv, indicating that people have to get to shelters as soon as possible. This is happening on day 409 of the war. This is certainly not the first time that Tel Aviv has been targeted, and it's certainly not the first time that this has happened on a day when the north has also been targeted. It has happened so many times throughout this war. You will be able to see in the background behind us, some members of our newsroom are going through to the shelters right now. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, staying on here to give us an account of what we are looking at right now on our screens.
Because it was on a real time, you can discuss whether it's a rocket siren or a RPV or a UAV. What does kind of a siren is it? Do you have any kind of information? If it's coming from rocket, probably it will be stopped on the way, or mostly there is a chance by Israeli anti-air system defense, or with the with the UAV, it has a lot of Air Force activities. And in this case, the most important that people will understand, they have to go to the shelter fulfill the orders from the area or the responsibility of the people who are responsible for these kind of things, and has to be for 10 minutes.
And certainly people do need to wait inside the shelters until the all clear has been given. Taking a look at the app right now, it certainly looks like red alert sirens have been sounding over major parts of the Dan and Sharon area as we speak. You are looking at images on your screen right now. And again, difficult to tell at this juncture exactly what this entails and where this so-called attack, whether it is projectiles, drones, rockets, we're not quite sure at this juncture, and not quite sure obviously where it would be emanating from. But Eitan Dangot, that is certainly something that experts will be looking at as we speak. Just to be clear, we are talking about thousands of people as we speak getting to safety, getting to shelter, to make sure that they wait the full 10 minutes until the all clear is given.
I mean, it's 100,000 of people who are going now to shelters.
Right. And it's so important that people do that. And just to give some kind of an understanding of what that includes, obviously it means that people need to get their children to safety, something that's happened so often throughout the war. They know the drill.
To look on the time, it's very close to 9 o'clock, what we call the most rush hour for families, for children who are going to bed, dinners. So I think that most of the activities now at home, it gives advantage to the family cabin to protect itself by going to its own room cabin or to a shelter in the building or all over they are there. Those who are in the streets has to fulfill the orders that are telling them to leave the cars, to stand in a place where they will be protected, to get the distance from their car, and we have to wait and to see till what will be reporting by the aid organizations and the military activities.
If you are just joining us now, it is breaking news here in Tel Aviv. Red alert sirens sounding once again, indicating that there is some form of incoming projectile, potentially drone, some kind of attack. Again, not clear at this juncture where it could be emanating from. Having said that, just a short while ago, we were talking about the threat, Eitan, not only out of southern Lebanon, also out of Iraq, Iranian-backed militias.
It can be, by the way, I don't know for which direction it was launching. It can be from the east, according to what we just spoke, or from Lebanon. What it's important to emphasize in such a way is that the reaction gives people opportunity more than 1.5 minutes to go to the shelter, not to run, not to be in panic, organize the things they need. And I think people quite trained themselves to such circumstances as we speak. We have to wait, but I think that this kind of launching is telling us that besides the central part of the country, it also has the Sharon area. It means that approximately more than 2 million people got this kind of alert. And it means that we have to, sometimes the rocket are 1 or 2 in such circumstances where it's rocket attack, but on their way, on the active of the air defense, on the issue of the parts that are from the defense that are launching towards this kind of rockets or missiles, you are putting the circle of defense to much more people than it has to be with the rocket. So it's taking measures with a lot of responsibility towards the Israeli population. On the other hand, this is our situation while IDF is fighting in the north, in Gaza, and we are in such circumstances that the enemy tries in 9 o'clock to show us its capabilities. And in my opinion, we are still on the same thing where we have been. It will pass in a few minutes, and then you will hear how many rockets, if it is rockets, and what I hope nobody has been wounded or damaged for such a thing. And according to the defense systems that are on a well alert, preparing to accept such kind of attacks.
We've been talking in recent weeks about the appropriate response to incidents like this. Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, when security leaders get together and they assess the recurrent rocket fire so long into this war, what is the appropriate response? This is all too normal.
I think that the response is quite what we are facing now. First of all, it depends, basically, Lebanon under a great offensive strike and attack from the air and from the ground by Israeli ground brigades and divisions. Secondly, in Gaza, also it's still the same war. In the east, you have a very well prepared the mechanism of getting the alert from cooperation with the United States CENTCOM and also from some Arab moderate country that has its own sensors that give us in advance the alert or the way the rocket is doing.
We are also getting reports coming in just now, breaking news, reports of an impact in Ramat Gan. Reports of an impact in Ramat Gan following these red alert sirens sounding. Not clear exactly what it involves, but it appears right now that a fire has broken out as a result of that impact, Eitan.
Yeah, we have to know first of all whether it's the rocket, whether it's a drone, or whether it's the pieces from the interceptions that were launched towards this kind. It doesn't matter. The issue is to be sure in a few seconds if there is casualties or not, or only damage in a place, a building, or another kind of area. We have to wait, but I tell you, while we are talking, for sure in Ramat Gan, you have many of alert movements that are on their way to the place to assist the first aid. The system is so well organized and so well prepared and so well professional, so we know how to manage with such a equation. And the response will be under, say, from where does it was launched, under for which country, and if it comes from the east, in my opinion, that will be another kind of calculation towards it.
If you're just joining us now, this is breaking news, red alert, sirens sounding in major parts of central Israel, including Tel Aviv and surrounds, and reports just a short while ago of an impact in Ramat Gan. It appears that a fire has also broken out as a result of that impact. This is obviously a developing situation. Major General in the reserves, Eitan Dangot, always appreciate your insights. Thank you very much for staying with us in studio for this broadcast. It's where we need to leave it right now. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a breaking news edition of The Rundown. Back again tomorrow, same time, same place. I'm Benita Levine, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for watching. This is I-24 News.